Ukraine is switching to emergency shutdowns to stabilize its power grid after yesterday's Russian missile attacks. About half of Kyiv's region is without electricity, and other major cities like Lviv are also in darkness. Overnight, more missiles hit critical infrastructure and residential houses near the southern city of Zaporizhia. No casualties were reported. 4 people were killed in Monday's attacks, and our chief correspondent, John Cookson, has this report.
Lviv is a major city in the west of Ukraine, now without power, where the nights are darker than normal with street lamps shut down. Even walking the dog has to be done by torchlight. This man says, it's impossible to get used to something like this, but you have to adapt. We have flashlights and batteries, he says, everything you need to feel comfortable. Meanwhile, a Russian airstrike in the Ukrainian city of Novoviska in the south of Ukraine leaves homes shattered and windows in ruins. This woman asks, why are our children dying? My godson is lying severely injured, a small child who came to visit his grandmother. Why is this happening? Ukraine is now seeing snow and sub-zero temperatures in many regions, and millions are without electricity and running water. There are fears a number of people may die of hypothermia. President Zelensky says maximum efforts are being made to restore power in the central regions of Ukraine, and in Odessa, Zaporizhia and Kharkiv, we've had to introduce power shutdowns. The Ukrainians are fighting back. In a separate development, the government of Russia's Kursk region said a Ukrainian drone attack on an airfield set an oil storage tank ablaze. And this video has emerged from near the Engels air base deep inside Russia. At 13 seconds is a sound of what may be a cruise missile. You have to assume it's Ukrainian. And at 40 seconds, a massive explosion. The base is home to Russia's supersonic bombers. The Kremlin claims only superficial damage. John Cookson, Arise News.
All right, John Cookson joins us now for more insight into that. Good afternoon, John, and welcome to Newsday. Now, getting straight into it, what are you hearing is the latest from Ukraine?
Hi, ladies. Great to be on Newsday. Well, the Ukrainians, of course, are having a terrible time of things as winter encroaches on the country. These power blackouts are obviously having a massive impact on life, not only for ordinary people, ordinary families at home without power to listen to turn the TV on or to turn the ovens on or to heat their homes, but also hospitals, stations. I mean, the whole infrastructure, which is dependent on electricity, is hugely impacted by these strikes. The big strikes yesterday were the 8th in 8 weeks by Russia, this new tactic to try to bring the Ukrainian people to their knees, sapping their morale as winter approaches. So that seems to be the way things are going to continue for the next coming weeks. As it continues to get colder in Ukraine, where temperatures often drop to minus 20 degrees centigrade. Also still attacks, as we heard, down in the south. And the Russians, meanwhile, accusing the Ukrainians of rocketing still this nuclear power plant at Zaporizhia in the south. It's controlled by the Russians, but and is in in Russian territory, but the dangers of this are absolutely huge. So that's still an ongoing issue. So generally speaking, things are pretty grim at the moment, and there seems to be no end in sight right now.
You did a great report, John, and in that you also mentioned a missile attack deep inside of Russia. How significant is that?
It's significant in the sense that it was, as you say, deep inside Russia, south of Moscow. And although the Ukrainians have attacked Russia on the edges so far, never have they penetrated hundreds of kilometers inside Russian territory. And this base that we're seeing images of it possibly, because these images are not verified yet, being bombed, is significant in the sense that the airbase is a Soviet-era airbase. It's a massive airbase. It's home to the Russia's Tu-95 and Tu-160 bombers, thought to be responsible for some of the attacks on Ukraine. The Russians will be deeply disturbed that the Ukrainians have managed to penetrate so deep inside Russia, and maybe this is a sign of things to come now. What help the Ukrainians have had in targeting the airbase from Western intelligence, we'll never know, but for sure they'll be getting real-time information from US spy satellites as to what the Russians have in terms of aircraft on the ground and where these aircraft are traveling to and from. So a very significant airstrike, and as I say, the deepest inside Russia so far by the Ukrainians.
Now, under normal circumstances, we know that the bitter winters in this region usually mean that wars slow down. But is there any sign of the Ukraine war slowing down as winter continues to come in?
On the ground, it seems to be both sides, Russians and the Ukrainians, preparing for what they say will be trench warfare in the new year. But as we've seen from these images and what I've been saying in the last few minutes, in the skies, it still seems to be continuing. That's, of course, not affected by winter. On the ground, one could argue that some of the watery areas of the south of Ukraine will be better for tanks when the water freezes, so they'll be able to travel over ground. But generally speaking, at ground level, the war does seem to be slowing. There are reports that both sides are rapidly rearming for a spring offensive. So that seems to be what's happening right now.
Are you hearing anything that's unexpected as a result of this development, John? Just wondering.
Yeah, there have been constant reports from the contacts that I made when I was in Ukraine and here in London of peace talks going on somewhere in the background, highly secretive peace talks involving the Americans and the Russians, because frankly, the only two powers that can end this war are the Americans and the Russians. Antony Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State, talking about that the Americans will be ready to talk peace. It's something he said before, and certainly the Turks, as honest brokers going between Russia and America, could easily facilitate this. But now we have Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, saying that it's not the right time for peace talks as of yet. We'll have to wait and see. There are talks of a Christmas ceasefire, and that would be a huge step forward, because once you've got a ceasefire in place, then you can start negotiating, and that's when the tough talking takes place. But until now, it's only reports, it's gossip amongst international diplomats, and we'll have to wait and see how things work out.
And with the worsening humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, as we talk about the rest of the world and a season like Christmas, are we going to see any more of an increase in inflow, any more of an increase in support for Ukraine during this time?
I think things are at their maximum at the moment. The Americans and Western nations like the UK, which are training thousands of Ukrainian forces and sending them back to the battlefield well equipped for the fight, and countries like Germany, Poland helping out with weaponry. I think we're at full tilt at the moment, because what's happening now is that some NATO countries they're denying this, but again there are reports that they're running low on the amount of weaponry and ammunition they can actually give to Ukraine, because Ukraine is just a constant begging from them for more equipment, more ammunition, more rockets and military equipment. It just never stops. But there are signs that, in fact, things are coming to a point where Europe and the US are helping to the maximum possible without, of course, the US and other Western nations, NATO members, getting involved directly in a fight with Russia, which, of course, no one wants.
Arise Chief Correspondent John Cookson, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday. We appreciate your time and analysis, as always.